On this week's episode of Top of the List, we continue our look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this week with Phase 2. Stay tuned to find out what's on top of the list.
What's up, guys? Dom here with my best friend Ryan Barnett, or RB as we all know him. So this week we're continuing our MCU series, starting going off with Phase 2. So we did Iron Man to the Avengers last week, and now we're at, what are we at? That was ended in 2012, so we're going to pick up again in 2013 with Iron Man 3, right, Ryan?
That's absolutely right, Dom.
Nice.
6 more films to go through to rank for you. We'll take you through how we do this one more time. We'll go through the films in chronological order, giving them a score out of 10, 10 being a masterpiece of film, 1 being a waste of your time completely. Most of our films will fall somewhere in the middle there. Closer to 10, great. Closer to 1, not so great. And at the end, we'll go through our list, worst to first, telling you what's on top of the list for us.
Starting off with Iron Man 3. So, this film came out in 2013. It's the third Iron Man film following the Avengers. Obviously, this film had a lot to do with the state of mind of Tony Stark after his great heroic moment in the Avengers, like we talked about last week, Ryan, that great moment when he flies through the portal and he talks to Pepper Potts for what he thinks might be the last time. So it's kind of his journey through PTSD. That's one of the reasons I like it. But I know that you're going to give this film probably a lower score. Want to go ahead and reveal what your thoughts are on Iron Man 3, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start right off with my score. I give this film a 6 out of 10. It's a good movie, definitely above average. I can watch it multiple times and still enjoy it. There are some difficulties with this film for me, and you're absolutely right. This is a film about the mindset of Tony Stark post the Battle of New York. That being said, I think it leads to a lot of slow scenes in this film. I know you, and you'll speak on this a little bit later, the scenes in Tennessee, I know you think that's a big evolution moment for Tony Stark as a person. I found a lot of those scenes very important, but I felt like almost that section of the movie went on for too long. I also, as you may remember from the last episode, I'm a big fan of a superhero movie being made by the villain. And to me, the villains were not that standout in this film. Guy Pearce as Aldrich Killian, I thought was mediocre. I mean, he's an all right villain. He's got a motive, but I didn't think he put on the best role. And then I so wanted Ben Kingsley as the Mandarin to be this truly evil symbol, and then to have him end up being Trevor, the actor, Trevor Slattery, was just so disappointing for me. There's some great action sequences in this film, don't get me wrong. I love the final scene on that oil rig. But otherwise, like I said, it's a good film, definitely 6 out of 10 for me.
Okay, so now for my score on Iron Man 3, my score, I'm gonna rate this one definitely a little bit higher than you, Ryan. Like you had mentioned previously, I like those scenes in Tennessee with Robert Downey Jr. and the young actor, I don't know his name,
Ty Simpkins.
Ty Simpkins. And yeah, he reappears at the end of Endgame, spoiler alert. But yeah, I think that this is a great dynamic between those two. It shows Tony Stark really having to do a lot of growing up, around that time. And I think that the whole character arc of Tony Stark is really the strong point for me in this movie. But I do have to admit, I think Guy Pearce isn't that great in this movie. I think he's, like you said, okay, fair enough. Shared the same thoughts as you, as I did want Ben Kingsley to be this pretty awesome Mandarin, because in all those war film things that he was making earlier in the movie, he seemed pretty awesome in those. Like, I was getting really hyped. I remember watching that in the theater and being like, oh, Ben Kingsley, he's going to be such a great villain in this movie. Mm-hmm. But when he does reveal himself to be Trevor, though, a lot of people hate that twist. But I remember in the theater not being too angered by it at all. I thought, okay, all right, it's just slightly disappointing for me. I think it worked for me in the end, though. And but I know that you were saying that you like the action scenes in this movie. I think the action in this movie is pretty awesome, really cool. Shane Black directed this movie. Obviously, he did because there's a lot of scenes that happen during Christmas, and in all of the Shane Black movies, there's always something that has to do with Christmas in a Shane Black film. Um, and I think what else? Oh, the whole. Oh, go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
Yeah, I had a question for you immediately. So we talked about the Ben Kingsley twist. There was
Uh-huh.
another scene in this film that I think may have not angered as many people as it angered me, but I have a question for you and want to see if
Okay.
it angered you. Pepper Potts on the oil rig falling into that explosion, and you see an evolution there in Tony Stark going to take on Guy Pearce's character, Killian. Uh, would you have preferred that truly have been Pepper Potts' demise? Obviously, we see Pepper Potts later on playing a major role, but to me, that's just a letdown. You see a character like that and see definitely a change in Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark in that scene, seeing Pepper fall to what he assumes is her demise. And then afterwards, it's all for naught because she survives. I understand it comes into the major plot twist that she's been injected with Pierce's regeneration serum. I'm not remembering the exact name of it, but
Gosh,
what
yeah.
were your
What is
thoughts on
that
that scene?
called? It's called. It comes from the comics, dude. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank here on that, but
I'll get it for you. I'll get it for you. But
extremis,
speak on your thoughts.
extremis.
Yeah.
Is it extremis? Do you think? I feel like it's something that has to do with extremis. Try that out, but maybe not because I feel like that's also an Iron Man.
You
Uh,
are correct. It is extremis.
okay, cool. Yes, yes. My comic book gold medal is right here. If anyone can see that. So yeah, dude. Uh, so here's the thing. There's two ways I want to answer this question. I'm going to be a little bit of politician right now. I'm going to answer the question I want to answer. So if you're asking me if in the moment I watched this movie for the first time in the theater, not knowing what would happen in the movies after, yes, I was disappointed that Pepper Potts all of a sudden just kind of survives that. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it could have been a powerful ending to an overall, what I thought was a great movie. And I would have been satisfied with that completely, with her dying. And then she came back to life. And I was like, oh, man, all right, okay. I mean, the action scenes made up for it for me in the end. But now, looking back, having seen everything that happens all the way up through Endgame, I think that it's okay that she's alive at the end.
Yeah,
So
and I
yeah,
think we can definitely agree on that. But in the moment, in the theater, I know this was one that we both saw in the theaters.
yes,
It was. I'm glad we can agree on that. That scene was sort of a letdown. And I think after the Ben Kingsley letdown as well, that sort of did this movie in for me. There were a
okay,
lot of things I wanted to see happen that did not.
yeah, I can definitely agree with that. So what else was I going to bring up? Oh, one major bonus, which is why I'm rating this one just slightly higher than Iron Man 2, is I know maybe you thought it was a little bit too much, but all the great armors we get to see and the mind control armor, gosh, don't take away my comic book gold medal, Ryan. What's the name of that armor? It's a Mark 43, I'm pretty sure, but he has a special name for it, the technology where it brings it to his mind and he's able to mind control it onto himself. It's pretty awesome. But like that's straight from the comics and I love that about it, which is leads me right into my big point. All the Silver Centurion and all the other great armors that he has made over the course of these years show up in this movie, and it's freaking awesome.
Yeah, and I thought, yes, I agree with you. It was very cool to see all the suits, and then you have them blow them all up in the final scene.
I could feel that too, though. Yeah, I definitely see where you're
I
coming
mean,
from.
all the hard work for naught there, and I understand it's a sign of devotion to Pepper. But if you're gonna have all these cool suits, and I mean that's basically up until we get the Mandarin attacking the Stark home in Malibu. I mean, what the film's about. That's what Tony's primarily doing is building all of these suits. I mean, then we sort of see all that work go for naught.
True, true. Yeah, and there is one big flaw that I think that this movie does kind of create that the later films tried to ignore. It's that he was supposed to, take out the reactor out of his chest, which is another big step for him in this movie. He takes the arc reactor out of his chest. He's able to live without it. He doesn't need that anymore. He's able to trust people to take that out of him and not have that holding him down anymore. But in the later films, like the next time we see him, I believe, well, yeah, I guess by Iron Man 2, or no, sorry, by Avengers 2, he's already has made all this huge army of Ultron robots completely against what he said in Iron Man 3. And plus, in Civil War, he brings up, they kind of mention it when he's talking to Captain America. He knows, because I can't stop. That's why Pepper left. I can't stop making these suits. I just can't stop being Iron Man. But they kind of just ignore that because we all want to see Iron Man on screen. We don't want to have to give him up. So that is an oversight in that screenplay that maybe they shouldn't have made him give up all those suits in the end. Maybe they shouldn't have made this such a big point. But I could see it's kind of a both sides here. I don't know what it was, a tough thing. I feel like the studios demanded, they needed a trilogy out of Iron Man, whereas I don't know. I think it was good after Iron Man 2 and then having Avengers 1 be the kind of conclusion in his arc.
Yeah.
But, they wanted to make a bunch of more movies afterwards, so they had to keep going. So let me give my score. I've said way more than I needed to. My score for this movie, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, just based on the action scenes, the incredible suit design, the Mandarin being awesome for most of the movie, and mainly the much stronger arc for Tony Stark in this movie. I think is much stronger story arc for Tony Stark than in Iron Man 2, which I know you thought he had a much better story arc in Iron Man 2. So for me, 8 out of 10. And for you, Ryan?
I definitely will stick with my 6 out of 10 for this one.
Okay.
So I think we've said all we need to say about Iron Man 3. We'll move on to our next film. That would be Thor: The Dark World, the second installment of the Thor films. I'll start off with my score with this film. I give this one a 5 out of 10. It is truly an average film in my books. This film really suffers from wanting to do too much with a film. I think there's so much going on between the storyline with the Ether, and you have Jane Foster, whereas you also
Absolutely.
have the story of Malekith. And I understand they all tie in together. You also add in that Loki's back, and he wants this revenge because of the death of his mother and Thor's mother by Malekith. I just think this film had a lot of great ideas, and it was really poorly executed.
Yeah, I think we should make this one easy, Ryan. I couldn't agree more. I'm definitely going to give Thor: The Dark World a 5 out of 10, the same as you. I was considering maybe giving it a 5.5, based on solely that Tom Hiddleston is still awesome as Loki. He's still a great villain, and I love how he can bring all the depth to this character. I love the way that he portrays the character, but I think what really brings this down, and this is something that I think brings a few of the movies down later on that I think you might get to see. I'm thinking specifically of Captain Marvel when I say this, is that they kind of shoehorned in the inclusion of an Infinity Stone. Like, they needed to show another Infinity Stone, so they built this story around the Realities Gem or the Ether. So I think that's a major negative. And like you said, Malekith, not a great villain, kind of just a mustache twirling guy, which is a problem I have with a great sum of the Marvel movies. Just a mustache twirler, generic villain, generic. You didn't really get to side with him. You didn't feel for him in any way. But one major positive, which I think I am going to make my score 5.5 because I just remembered this part. I like the emotional scene at the end where Loki supposedly dies and Thor finally feels for him a little bit.
Oh, you're absolutely right. That is
Yeah.
definitely the money shot in this film,
Yeah,
so to
absolutely.
speak. While Loki is dying, as far as we know, the audience as that at that time in his brother's arms. You're absolutely right there. That is a big scene, and once again, masterfully acted by shoot. Hold on.
Tom
Can we
Hiddleston.
do a cut? Thank you. Masterfully acted by Tom Hiddleston there, and just showing off once again his range. I think it definitely took some time for Chris Hemsworth to grow into the role of Thor. I think we see his true best Thor moments in Ragnarok.
Couldn't agree
Uh,
more.
but when you look at Loki's character from Thor 1 and into the Dark World, I think that Tom Hiddleston is absolutely brilliant in this role and brings the Thor movies together to be at least average films, and then continuing into Ragnarok too. Great films.
Yeah. One last thing on this movie. The CG in this movie, I felt they used way too much CG. For me in this movie, it was a little noticeable. But then again, the CG is always pretty high quality in this series of films, the MCU. But the other thing, last point I want to make against this is, maybe you could look this up for me right now, Ryan. I can't remember who directed this movie, and that's a big negative. I can remember most of the MCU directors. I can remember because I know their style. And this movie, it didn't shine through. Who directed this one?
Yeah, this film was directed by Alan Taylor, and this was really one of his first true major feature films that he directed. He directed Terminator Genesis after this film, but other than that, not a big directorial filmography. And
Yeah.
like I said, I think he definitely tried to do a little too much with this film.
Yeah, common mistake with first-time directors. So for me, I'm gonna stick with it just because of Tom Hiddleston. I'm gonna give this a 5.5. You're gonna give this one a 5, right, Ryan?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, then I think we can move on to the next one. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. And let's move on. I think this is the first big, to me, major successful film in MCU Phase 2. We're moving on to Captain America, the Winter Soldier.
Oh man, oh man. Let me say what I gotta say on this one first,
You
my
go right
dude.
ahead.
Okay, okay, let me just focus myself. So, okay, I've talked about how much I love the Avengers. I talked about how much I love Iron Man 1. For me, Iron Man 1 started it all. You know, it was a revolutionary film in that it started a superhero trend that we hadn't seen yet before, the origin story we hadn't seen yet before. And then the Avengers blew it up to another level with the amount of characters we had on the screen, the amount of epic moments we had on screen. Captain America, the Winter Soldier is a revolutionary film for the excellent action scenes alone. Hand-to-hand combat done by the stuntmen in this movie is on another level, something I had never seen on the big screen before. For me, there's a few movies, I know you'll agree with me, Ryan, that are action movie landmarks. Number one would probably be Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Number two would probably be Mad Max Fury Road. Those are two legendary action films. For me, number three, Captain America Winter Soldier. Some of the greatest hand-to-hand combat, some of the greatest action direction by the Russo brothers, their first MCU film. They blew it out of the park. There is only one small slow spot in this movie, and for me, that's in a little bit in the middle when they have the big twist reveal. I think the movie slows down a little bit there. So I'm going to mark it down only a half a point from a 10 out of 10. I'm going to give this a 9.5 out of 10. An amazing, amazing film. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, no, this is definitely an awesome film. I think you covered a lot of the points that I was going to go over on this film. I give this film an 8.5 out of 10. Couldn't agree. The combat is awesome in this film. I love the twist, sort of coming full circle. You know, I don't want to give any spoilers, so a spoiler alert out there. But
Yeah.
the fact that Hydra has infiltrated and has been working under the veil of Shield for all these years, I think is incredible. And that
Yes.
big aha moment when we're in the bunker in New Jersey and we see the computerized version of Zemo
It's
going
actually
over
Arnim Zola.
Zola. I know
Yeah.
we screwed that up. I mean,
That's
okay,
cool.
ready?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, the computerized version of Dr. Zola when we get to the bunker in New Jersey. I think that's an awesome scene. And then, yeah, like you said, the action sequences in this film, right from the beginning when we get onto the ship being hijacked, all the way till the end, that final combat scene
Yep.
between Bucky and or the Winter Soldier now, I should say, and
Yeah.
Cap. And how about once again a brilliant performance by Sebastian Stan?
As the Winter Soldier, absolutely. I mean, for most of the movie, you don't get to see his face, and he's so menacing. This was the moment where I had seen Tom Hiddleston as the best villain up to this point, and then the Winter Soldier came on, and as soon as he stepped onto the screen, I was like, you know, and it's a big moment when he steps on the screen for the first time because Captain America hurls his shield at him, and he just catches it. And right then, I was like, oh my gosh, this movie's going to be amazing. And like you said, that twist in the room with the computers and Arnim Zola, I mean, you and me have said this before that we weren't able to be in theaters when the big twist in Empire Strikes Back happens, you know, I am your father. But for me, when I was in the theater, I was getting that kind of feeling in the theater for I felt this was my generation's I am your father. Like Hydra has been in control of S.H.I.E.L.D. the whole time. I mean, butterflies are in my stomach. I was like, gosh, this movie is so incredible. And one big point I want to make too is this brings in one awesome line that we get called back to in Endgame with "On Your Left." That's how this movie starts, right? I mean, with Anthony Mackie's character, the Falcon. yeah, he says, I'm on your left, and then the movie bookends with that too, when Captain America's in the hospital bed, on your left. I think that is just a great through line that they carry through all the way to the end.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, to that point, I think the introduction of Anthony Mackie's character, the Falcon, is incredible. I mean, that scene where they're throwing, it's the congressman, right? They throw
Yep.
him off the building, and then he goes down and swoops and catches him, and then brings him back up. I think that's such a cool intro to the Falcon suit and our character, the Falcon, because up until that point, we just know Anthony Mackie as the paratrooper who
Yep.
knows Captain America from VA and
Yep.
whatnot. So I think that's an awesome introduction to him. One thing, I'll knock this down again, the
Yeah.
same way I felt about Pepper Potts in Iron Man 3. The death or lack thereof of Nick Fury in this film, though. Once
Okay.
again, I am not a fan when films will kill a character. You get this big emotional scene. I mean, you have it. They watch Nick Fury die on the table, and then he comes back, and that just doesn't sit right with me. And I don't know why it hasn't ever upset me with Loki's character. Maybe it's because they never bring Loki back in the film that he dies in, and that's not always the case. He does come in a little bit at the end of Thor 2. But I don't know, that just doesn't sit right with me. I've always felt that if they're going to make that decision,
Yeah.
I understand in the grand scheme of things you can't kill off Nick Fury, but
Yeah.
it happened, and you see it, you have all these emotional reactions to it, and then they were for naught because he's still there.
Yeah, I definitely agree here, Ryan. They could have killed him off. He only shows up for a small scene in Avengers 2, and then he only shows up at the end of Infinity War for a few moments, and that's in the present day. Whereas in Captain Marvel, he's all the way in the past. They could have still made that movie with him because he's all the way in the 90s. So
Yep.
they could have killed him off in this movie, and it would have gone through well. So I think I might have misspoke earlier that I said the slow spot in this movie was in the middle. So the slow spot for me, just so I'd be very specific, is when they find out that Nick Fury is alive. They all kind of come together in this room and they sit there and they talk about what to do next. For me, that kind of is like the hit a brick wall, but then quickly it picks back up with the huge, helicarriers falling out of the sky and everything. So that's pretty amazing. One thing we did not touch on yet, I want to make sure you get your say on this, Ryan. The chemistry between Scarlett Johansson, Natasha Romanoff, and Chris Evans, Captain America. Awesome.
I think it's incredible, and I think it's a great scene of sort of, not only Captain America sort of being brought into the modern warfare, so to speak, of the Avengers, but also for Natasha Romanoff to learn a lot more about Steve Rogers as a person, because I mean, they know about him as the man who went under in the ice, and they know who Captain America is, but she learns a lot more about the character of Steve Rogers and that story arc, and I think that plays a lot to the backstory that's established in this film, and I really, really love how Scarlett Johansson and Chris Evans play off of each other, especially in the beginning of this film. I do want to add one more thing about this film before we jump away. I think one of the coolest scenes in the MCU, especially in this phase, is on the elevator when they brand Captain America as a fugitive, and they have all the SHIELD agents or Hydra agents around him. And he goes, "All right, before we do this, anyone want to get off?" And nobody sort of moves, and he just, beats the tar out of all these SHIELD agents,
Yes.
Hydra agents. I think that is one of the coolest scenes in the MCU phase 2, maybe in the MCU altogether.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. One of the greatest action scenes ever put to film. That incredible scene. Chris Evans doing a lot of the stunts, not all, but a lot of the stunts there. Really great job by him. I love Natasha Romanoff in this movie, just like you. Last point for me on this one. Actually, maybe 2 points. So, number one, I love that this movie is the first political thriller as a superhero movie. I know some might claim that The Dark Knight is also a political thriller. I think it's more of a crime drama. I know maybe you don't go into the genre as much as I do, Ryan, but I think that this is the first political thriller superhero movie, and the Russo brothers did an excellent job for creating this kind of film. And just to enhance, this is my second point, it goes along with it, is that just to enhance the fact that this is a political thriller, they have the king of political thrillers from the 80s, Robert Redford, play one of the main villains, right? I mean, and I love Robert Redford in this movie. What do you think about him?
He is truly a great villain in, like you said, it definitely is a political thriller. I had never observed this film in that way before, but as this menacing politician who really is pulling the strings for the other side, for Hydra at the top of Shield, I think it is truly a devious character, not for our traditional view of a villain in a superhero film, but when you look at it from that genre title of political thriller, you're absolutely right. He does a masterful job there.
Couldn't agree more. So for me, this is a 9.5 out of 10. Ryan, this is an 8.5 out of 10. So yeah, great film. What's our next film?
We're moving right along now. So from Earth, we go otherworldly here. We get into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. And man, oh man, you want to talk about a movie that truly, truly blew me out of the water. I went into this film thinking, oh, great, we're in, MCU phase 2 here, and I have to learn a whole new team of characters that I have never heard of. You've heard of Iron Man and Captain America, not so much of Drax the Destroyer and Star-Lord and Gamora. This film blew me out of the water from start to finish. I mean, the combination of action, of zippy comedic lines given by Chris Pratt and even by Drax, by Dave Bautista in this film, and then paired with the soundtrack. Man, Gunn did it. Sean Gunn, is that correct?
James Gunn.
Brother. James Gunn, thank you.
Sean Gunn is the kind of guy that does the Rocket Raccoon VFX, and
Okay,
he's also that one guy that's in the Ravagers.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, who takes over, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So, and the way James Gunn directs this film is truly brilliant. I'm a huge fan of the Guardians of the Galaxy. This film, from start to finish, I can't find really one slow spot, one spot that I didn't like. I give this film a 9.5 out of 10.
Wow. Okay, 9.5 out of 10. A rare 9.5 out of 10 for Ryan. Hasn't given one of those since Hateful Eight, if I'm correct.
That is absolutely right.
Okay, cool. I couldn't agree more. I'm gonna say this now. I've seen this movie in theaters 6 times. I paid for the ticket 6 times. I love this movie so much, but I am gonna give it a half point lower than The Winter Soldier. I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10, and that's for one big flaw in this movie. I don't know if you agree or disagree with me on this, Ryan. Ronan. I think he's just another mustache twirler, not much depth behind him.
I kind of see that, but I like to view Ronan in this film because Ronan is the first character that sort of brings out and allows us to see Thanos. We don't really see Thanos after, we've discussed this, after the end credit scene at Avengers, but we see the communication between Ronan and Thanos, and I think that makes him a worthwhile character, even though he's not truly that great of a villain. I do enjoy watching him, beat up a very incapacitated, drunken Drax on Nowhere. I think that's kind of a comedic scene. But, yeah, he's not a great villain, but I would put him a notch above, like we were talking about earlier today, the villain in Iron Man 3. Or I'd put him a notch above, I'd put him on a level of like a Red Skull. I'll tell you that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so for me, 9 out of 10, you 9.5. So we got the negative out of the way. Let's talk about the big positive for me in this movie, the star-making turn by Star-Lord himself, Chris Pratt.
Oh, he is brilliant in this film. Like I said, from start to finish, he so embodies, and I think maybe it's because he's with a bunch of aliens the entirety of the film. He embodies the human experience, I think, in this film. You can laugh with him. You can cry with him. You can, get behind him when he has these action scenes. I think one of the great scenes that really takes us there is when he's, trying to distract Ronan. He does the dance battle scene. I think that is incredible. I mean, yes, for its comedic value, but to see, that's his thought and that's what he's going to do. That's a very human reaction, I would say. Something that you wouldn't expect to see in a superhero film. So I think Chris Pratt does a masterful job here in the role of Peter Quill, of Star-Lord. So definitely a big fan of the entire cast of this film, all the way down to, and I know he's sort of a menial, not a menial role, but a less important role, definitely more of a supporting role. I love John C. Reilly
Yeah.
in this film as a Nova Corps member. I think he is awesome in this film. I'm a big John C. Riley fan, big Will Ferrell fan, of course, so that sort of ties in the John C. Riley connection. But to see him in a role like this, I think he was perfectly cast as well.
Yeah, I mean, a few things on what you said there. Number one, I love that the climax of this movie is a dance battle. What? That's so great. Who? That's so creative. Only James Gunn could have come up with that. That's just a mark of genius. John C. Riley, great, almost like a comedic slash serious performance when you find out he has a family that he's worried about. It's just a small role, but it adds a lot to the movie. Another big emotional performance from a little tiny bit of acting, Vin Diesel as the voice of Groot. I mean, I was tearing up in the theaters when he said, "We are Groot." I mean, what a great moment. What a great moment. And Bradley Cooper, just building off of that with Rocket Raccoon. Great acting by Bradley Cooper. Excellent cast of characters. You couldn't agree more.
And I think the acting too, and the juxtaposition of all the different characters coming together. We saw it a little bit with the coming together in the Avengers as well. But seeing all these sort of brand of misfits come together, especially in the prison, the kiln, when they all come together and start working as a team, is really really great to see. And the emotion too, yes, definitely between Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel, Rocket Raccoon and Groot. But also, how about that scene where Star-Lord basically sacrifices himself, puts the mask on Gamora as they're floating outside of nowhere before the Ravagers pick them up. I think that is truly an emotional scene where we see the coming together of what were two enemies the first time we see them on screen, fighting over the orb that holds the Infinity Stone.
Absolutely. Great sacrifice there by that. And, you know, they don't keep you sad too long. That's what James Gunn is great at. But then again, for me, it also kind of weakens Guardians of the Galaxy 2 a little bit for me. He goes from sad to funny, maybe a little too quick sometimes. Also happens in Thor Ragnarok a little bit. The only negatives I have for those couple movies, but we'll talk about that in the next episode. But in this movie, James Gunn had full command of his craft, I think, from, like you said, from minute one to the last minute. I was fully in this. I mean, I remember I went with I don't think I saw this one with you, or I might have seen it with you later,
We
but for
saw
the
it, yeah.
okay, yeah. So the first time I saw it, I didn't see it with you, but I saw it with you like a second or third time. But the first time I saw it, I remember it was with one of my other friends from high school, and he knew nothing about the Marvel movies, knew nothing at all. He's like, "Oh, I'm not going to enjoy this." And in like the first minute, he's dying laughing, just totally loving it, totally just completely enthralled by the characters in this movie. He was feeling it. He was in the plot. Totally, he's like, "Wow, that's the best, $11 I spent on a ticket this whole year." So I think that speaks for itself. For me, a 9. For you, a 9.5, Ryan. What's our next film?
So we go from one team up film to another. Avengers 2, Avengers Age of Ultron. Now I think we're gonna disagree a little bit on this film, Dom. I was not a fan. I left this film, left the theater after it was over, just so disappointed. I give this one a 6.5 out of 10, and here's why. I took a lot of time thinking about this film after how great the Avengers was, watching this team work so hard together to truly become a team. I felt almost as if this film was too easy for them to be a team. They were a team the entire film. And I think the beauty of Avengers, the original Avengers, is watching them come together. And we did not have that in this film. I mean, we have the transformation of the Maximoff twins, of Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, but otherwise, it's just, quite honestly, for most of the film, I feel like it's the Avengers kicking butt. And I mean, we kind of have come to expect that. Ultron, I mean, he's kind of a neat character. Vision is a cool addition. They're not my favorite. I know that'll upset a lot of people, but I give this one a 6.5 out of 10. I felt like the film was unnecessary. The major part of this film was to introduce Wanda Maximoff, Scarlet Witch, and to introduce Vision. Those are the two major points in this film, and I feel like they took a long time and a lot of unnecessary scenes to do that.
Okay, yeah. So I felt the same way. We saw this one together for the first time, Ryan. I mean, not for the first time, but like when we first saw it in theaters. We've seen other MCU films before this together. But I walked out of the theater with you, and I said, definitely a step down from Avengers 1. But for me, at the time, I probably would have given this a 7, maybe a good film, but my real score is definitely going to be an 8 for a very similar reason as I was talking about in a lot of these MCU films. Looking back from the end game, from that perspective, I think there's a huge argument that this is the most important MCU film. I know that you're going to strike me down with thunder right now, Ryan, but I mean, I think this is a very important MCU film. A lot of stuff with Tony Stark important to his character happens in this movie. A lot of stuff with, like you said, the Maximoff twins happens. Vision happens in this movie. Um, I think Ultron is a great, great villain. I love oh man, don't let me forget his name right now. Is Ultron? Look it up for me. Uh, James Spader. Don't have to look it up. I'm a genius. James Spader. He's awesome in this movie as Ultron. I love him as the voice of Ultron. Yeah, I think he's great. Great voice acting there. Very creepy trailer with the no strings on me. I love that, how they added that in the trailer. Vision, I thought was great in this movie. What else did I? Oh, so the reason I was disappointed. The reason I was disappointed in this movie is I felt like the CGI was very noticeable in some scenes in this movie, especially the opening scene. Very noticeable in a few shots. Misstep there by Joss Whedon. Big flat spot with Thor's character arc in this movie. That's just set up for Ragnarok, really, but it never gets followed through that much. It's not that important to this movie. It's like, oh, we just need to set up Thor Ragnarok so it's in this movie. But other than that, I mean, who doesn't like seeing the Avengers come together at the end and battle all those robots? I thought that was pretty cool. Lots of cool scenes. One of my favorite beats in this movie is when Vision picks up that hammer and says, "Here, we might need this." And it's pretty cool. I like how he brought that up, and I don't know. For me, this is an 8 out of 10.
I think I can say here is why I don't like Ultron as a character. I think I pinpointed it just now when you were explaining that. I think that Ultron, I mean, his goal is to do for Ultron and only Ultron. There is no greater cause to him, I guess. I mean, he wants to destroy humanity. And to me, that makes him a villain who has nothing he's fighting for. I mean, does that make sense? He's sort of a villain who's fighting for himself, but most of our villains have higher causes. I mean, even to Thanos, who's our grand villain, I mean, he has a reasoning for, he's not destroying all of humanity. He is destroying half because he has a reason. So to me, with a villain like Ultron, you have no one who can get behind him, no one who is supporting him except for himself. I mean, you knew eventually the Maximoff twins were going to turn, or it was going to cost them their lives.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was sort of, I don't know, that hurt his character arc to me.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's pretty fair. I don't know. I think that the logic behind his character was that he was transplanted into the internet, very 2010 thing to do, and he sees that, all these people are, going into violence, and he just wants to end the world and reboot it, start over with a world made of all metal, of something that he could envision perfect, which is in itself a character flaw of Tony Stark. It's the ego of Tony Stark showing through, which I think there's a lot of depth there if you search for it. But like you said, on the surface, maybe his plan is a little selfish. I also love the line at the end. I don't know if you remember this or not, Ryan. You probably do, where Vision finds the last Ultron after they destroyed them all, and he says, they are doomed, and then he says, yes, they are, but it'll be beautiful, or something like that. And he says, I was born yesterday. I love that scene. I think that's a great moment for Vision there.
Yeah, no, that is a great scene in this film. I'd also like to talk, a positive of this film.
Yeah.
Once again, the use of Natasha Romanoff to bring out another character and finding a lot more, because we lose it. We have somewhat of a backstory with Ed Norton's Hulk, but then with Mark Ruffalo's Hulk, their chemistry in this film, and this also does lead us into Ragnarok and how Hulk got to what happens in Thor Ragnarok. But definitely the chemistry between the two, and we learn a lot about Mark Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo's Hulk, I should say. We learn a lot about Natasha Romanoff as well in this film, which I love to see, and finding out more of her backstory, because we don't really get that with Natasha Romanoff. She's sort of just thrown in to these films. She does not have a standalone movie. We've got Black Widow coming up soon, so really
Yep.
excited to see more about her. But until that, we hadn't seen it much. She's introduced briefly in a lot of the films, but that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cannot wait to see what happens in Black Widow. Looks like another great action movie. Joss Whedon directed Avengers 2 again after directing the first Avengers. A step down here, but you could definitely tell, as people who have coined it on the internet, a lot of Whedonisms in this movie, watch your language, stuff like that. A lot of great funny moments. But yeah, definitely I would agree with you, Ryan. A step down, major step down from the first Avengers movie. But that brings us to the sixth film in the MCU Phase 2, our final one we're going to be discussing today, one that you and me both are huge fans of, a lot to talk about here, Ant-Man.
Yeah, Ant-Man, man. Another film like Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't think Ant-Man is nearly as widely a recognized character as an Iron Man or a Captain America or an Incredible Hulk. And yet, this film, to me, one of my favorite Marvel movies of all time. I give it a 9 out of 10. This
Wow.
film, like Guardians of the Galaxy, had me locked in from start to finish. I was a little skeptical about the casting of Paul Rudd because I'm a big Anchorman fan. We tie back to Will Ferrell again, and that's what I know Paul Rudd from, and didn't know if he could carry a superhero role. He, like Chris Pratt, does it perfectly. I love his story arc, sort of almost a Robin Hood type, stealing from the rich to give back to the poor. That's how he ends up in San Quentin in the beginning of the film. And then later on, he's trying to find a way to get back to his daughter, which I think is such a powerful sequence. And that's how he gets in with Hank Pym and Hope Van Dyne. He steals the ant suit, which is really a setup from Hank Pym, and just watching him, there's just that emotional part of seeing him. There's such desperation to get back with his daughter. I think that is huge in this film. I absolutely love the performance given by Paul Rudd, and I give this film a 9 out of 10. There's lots more to talk about it, so I'm going to throw it over to you, Dom.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also a huge fan of this film. Gonna give it just a half point down from in score from you, 8.5 out of 10. I remember saying, man, Avengers 2, a little bit of disappointment there, but then it brought it back up. I said, man, Ant-Man was really great though. I loved Ant-Man. It was almost better than, and it was in the end better than Avengers 2. I think that this is a better MCU film than Avengers 2. Got me way more excited to see what was going to happen in the future. So but I do have to say, where Avengers 2 had a huge slow spot in it with everything that was going on with Thor and the visions he was having and going to that well, I just thought that was a big slow spot there. And like even some of the stuff that's going on at the farm with Hawkeye's children. That's another thing, Ryan. I forgot. Hold on. Put the whole thing on pause. We never talked about Hawkeye once in the first video on Avengers, and in this video, I mean, we both love Hawkeye, right?
I mean, I'm okay with us not talking about him.
Oh, you're gonna do him like that? Damn.
He is truly the most background Avenger. I know you and I had talked about this way back in high school. You had sent me a YouTube video about Hawkeye singing to "Thinking Out Loud" by Ed Sheeran, a spoof.
Absolutely.
And I thought, I laughed hysterically on that film because that's how you feel about Hawkeye. I mean, he's one step above an extra playing a shield agent who's, shooting a gun trying to protect the Avengers as they kick ass. He's I think he's absolutely useless in a lot of the story arcs until we get to his character in Endgame.
Yeah, I could agree with that for the most part. I think that he's pretty cool. Like, you're right. He has little tiny story arcs over these movies. Definitely a background character. But dude, Ryan, maybe I'm as super as they are. That's a great song. If anyone is watching this, hasn't seen that video, go check it out. The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, or it might have been when he was on The Late Show. I'm not sure, but yeah, check it out. Jeremy Renner sings to the tune of Thinking Out Loud. So great. But yeah, so we just had to say a little bit on Hawkeye. back to Ant-Man. 8.5 out of 10 for me. Major point knocked down for me was the villain, Yellow Jacket. Once again, said it a lot in this video, big mustache twirler. Not much of a, oh, I feel for this guy. Not like Tom Hiddleston, not for like Bucky. You know, I don't know. It's just you don't feel anything for him. He's just a businessman in this movie. That's a major knockdown for me in this movie. But one thing I do have to say, no pacing problems that much in this movie. Not as much as in Avengers 2, which I had a huge pacing problem with.
I'd like to jump back about the character of Yellow Jacket.
Yeah.
I agree that Yellow Jacket, as the Yellow Jacket, you're right. He's a villain who's there to don the suit, which is cool, and to battle Paul Rudd in that final scene. That being said, I love the performance as Darren Cross. I think when he's Darren Cross, he's sort of this almost tortured businessman trying to recreate the Pym particle. I think, and some of the face-offs between him and Michael Douglas in this film are fantastic. I think some of the words exchanged between the two towards the beginning of the film are great. So as much as when he's the Yellow Jacket, I think he's, I think he's as almost like a mad scientist character. I like him in this film, just as Darren Cross.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree, but I just think overall that character not the strongest, but like you said, Yellow Jacket. But let's talk about someone that stole the show for me in this movie.
I think we were just about to bring up the same point. Are we about to talk about Michael Pena?
Yep, we're talking about Michael Pena. I love the scenes where he's talking about everything and everything's going back in his mind. And he's like, and then I heard it from so-and-so. That's so great. I was dying in the theater, cracking up. Love him in this movie.
Oh, I mean, honestly, I'll be honest with you. I love Michael Pena in just about everything. He is fantastic, both in a serious role and in a comedic role. This one's a little more comedic. Actually, the first film I ever saw Michael Pena in was in the film End of Watch. For those of you who haven't seen End of Watch out there.
That's a 10 out of 10 for me. I have to say it right now.
End of Watch, a great film. Another film I went in not knowing much about, but his performance in that film is an amazing, much darker than an Ant-Man, definitely, and much darker than the character he plays. But then seeing him get into more comedic films, definitely, and this one he is fantastic in. Another great comedic role he plays that I'd like to give a shout out to that not many people like, Tower Heist, a great film where he plays a comedic role. I think he alongside Ben Stiller in that film, but he is just a fantastic actor in this film. And you're right, the way he delivers the lines and how they pair it with the cinematography, the cutting back to it's almost it's the flashback. You see the characters talking, but it's with his voice. They utilize it in the TV show Drunk History, which I'm a big fan of. You have actors reenacting something to someone else's voice, but still lip syncing the words. I think he is brilliant for this role. I think the way he plays with Paul Rudd is great too. I mean, they're two sort of buddies, almost Abbott and Costello-esque.
Yes.
I think they are fantastic in this film. Wouldn't have expected to see the duo in a superhero film at all, but man, oh man, did they play it great here.
Oh yeah, couldn't agree more. I think that kind of style we're talking about, the cutting back to people's mouths moving, that might have been a Paul Feig director move that he used. Maybe, I think it might have started in Bridesmaids. Not sure. Maybe some people can go and research that on their own, though. I don't know. But yeah, Michael Pena is awesome in this movie. Evangeline Lilly, she's kind of plays a backseat in this movie, but she's really good. I do have to say, some people rate her as kind of like a, not that great of a character in the next movies. I think she's great as Wasp. I think this movie sets the stage for her to be great as Wasp, and that's what this movie needed it. And the tease at the end with her seeing the costume, I remember sitting in the theater like, we're going to get to see Ant-Man and the Wasp. I was so excited because that's a huge, big nerd moment for me, having watched all the cartoons with Ant-Man and the Wasp in it all the time. Like, that was pretty cool. And then, we got to save it for next week, but eventually we're going to get to Giant Man, and what a great moment that is. That reminded me of that for some reason. But yeah, so for me, this one's an 8.5. Ryan, this was a 9 for you, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've gone over every film. Any last thoughts on Ant-Man, or are you good?
No, I think we're ready to go through the lists.
Okay, cool. Let me get a second to think about my list. You go and start with yours, Ryan.
All right, I definitely will go right ahead then. We've got 6 films in this list. I'm going to start right off with Thor: The Dark World at number 6. I give it a 5 out of 10. A film that had a lot of great ideas that didn't execute on one of them extremely well. A lot of cool scenes, definitely, but nothing that truly stood out for me above average. So 5 out of 10 for Thor: The Dark World. Coming in next at number 5, I go Iron Man 3. Another film, a lot of cool action sequences, definitely, but there were a lot of negatives in this film. A kind of poor villain, a couple of twists that I wanted to see that didn't happen. So this one I give a 6 out of 10, Iron Man 3. Coming in at number 4, I'll go with Avengers Age of Ultron, 6.5 out of 10. Wasn't a big fan of Ultron, wasn't a big fan of continuing the Avengers story without having any major turmoil, and we get major turmoil later on, which I love to see with the Avengers. We'll call it Avengers drama. We didn't have enough in it in this film, to me at least. So I give this one a 6.5 out of 10. Put it at 4th. At 3rd, and the top 3 in this are great films for me. So separated by fractions of a point. I'll go Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I give it an 8.5 out of 10. I mean, I really, really love this film, and it hurts it in this list that there's so many great films here. The action's awesome in this film. It's a dark film, and I think the only reason I give it an 8.5 out of 10 in the next 2 higher scores are because I love when Marvel mixes in the comedy here and there, and this film didn't
Fair
have
enough.
much of a comedic break. Not to its discredit, though. It's a great film, 8.5 out of 10, definitely. Second, 9 out of 10, Ant-Man. Love it, love it, love it. A lot of comedy in this film. Some really cool scenes, definitely. But 9 out of 10. It's not a perfect 10 or a 9.5. The film that was a 9.5 out of 10 for me, the closest to the most complete masterpiece of a film in this MCU, top of the list for me, Guardians of the Galaxy. This film had it all. It had action, it had drama, it had comedy, it had a great soundtrack, and it had some really, really awesome sets and cinematography work. I mean, how cool is going into nowhere? I mean, a land that is in the skull of a dead celestial being. That is so cool to me.
Yes.
So, I mean, everything on this film was executed almost perfectly to a T. So 9.5 out of 10, top of my list, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Great. Awesome list, Ryan. Very small deviations for me on my list, so I'm going to go through a lot quicker. Most of the bottom half of my list is exactly the same as yours. At the bottom, number 6 for me is going to be Thor: The Dark World. I gave it a 5.5 out of 10 only on the caliber of Tom Hiddleston's performance. That's what made it slightly just a half point above 5 out of 10. So 5.5 for me, number 6. Moving on to number 5. For me, that's going to be Iron Man 3. For me, this was a good movie. I thought it was, what did I give it? Like an 8 out of 10, I think. It's just slightly better than Iron Man 2. For me, the strong point was Tony Stark's character arc. I loved it, and a lot of the comic book geek moments with the great suit design in this movie. So for me, yeah, I'm sitting at number 5, Iron Man 3. Sitting at number 4, I'm going to go with, I think I'm going to go Avengers 2, just like you, Ryan. Number 4, Avengers 2. We've already discussed that in an amalgam of times. Big slow spot knocked it way down from 10 to 8 between the first Avengers and second Avengers. So big 2-point drop there. A little bit of a disappointment, but some highlights in that movie. Then we're at number 3, top 3. Once again, like you said, Ryan, top 3 films here. All excellent films. Number 3 for me is going to be Ant-Man. This is where our list deviates a little bit. Ant-Man is sitting at number 3, 8.5 out of 10. Great film. Lots of great comedy there. Paul Rudd's awesome. Great cast. Everyone, Michael Douglas is great in this movie. I didn't have that many bad things to say about this movie. Villain, not that great. Number 2, I'm going to have to go with Guardians of the Galaxy, another deviation from your list, Ryan. Not quite at the top for me, but come on. This movie was a blast. The villain, once again, was a weak point for me. Mustache twirler. I've said it too many times this video. But other than that, like you said, the soundtrack, incredible. Set design, incredible. Acting, incredible. Everything's incredible except for the villain, which is a commonality for me in most of these MCU films. So then that brings me to the top of the list for me. and that's going to be number 1, Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Oh man, the quintessential action film of the, I mean, I know that Mad Max Fury Road came out around the same time as this one, but I mean, geez, this movie blew me away in the theaters. Great twist, great acting, excellent villain, the first truly excellent villain since Tom Hiddleston. We can't talk about the action enough. World-class action scene and directing. I mean, gosh, Russo brothers, you blow me away. That you've made every film you've made is incredible in the MCU. I mean, geez, I mean, top of the list. It's great. You know, that's all I can say. Go ahead, Ryan. What do you got to say?
Yeah, no, I think our lists are very close, and that's what's great about talking these films over with you, and hopefully our fans enjoy out there as well. Just hearing where our deviations are, and we'd love to hear what your thoughts are as well. So be sure to drop a comment. What's on top of your list, MCU Phase 2, as well as any ideas you'd like to see for us in the future. We're going to continue on this MCU trend. We're going to have a couple more episodes. We're going to split up Phase 3 into 2 parts, so stay tuned for that. Otherwise, though, be sure to like our video and give us a follow as well right here, top of the list on YouTube. We're coming out every Monday with new episodes. Otherwise, Dom, you want to take us out?
Sure, Ryan, I'll take us out, dude. You can follow me at Dom Gonzalez 48 on Instagram and Twitter, DOMGONZALES, and then 48, right? That's right, Dom. That's an 8. Good job. Yeah. Hey, I used the German 3 from the people will get that from the last episode, yeah? Or the first episode, right? German 3?
German 3.
Okay, cool.
Quentin Tarantino.
Right. We love Quentin Tarantino. Okay, we've rambled on long enough. We'll see you guys next week for another video. It's going to be MCU Phase 3. Get ready for that, and we'll catch you then.